Hey guys, it's Spook here. Here's just the usual disclaimer before the video starts. This video is detailing Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge and their reign of terror throughout Cambodia. Basically what that means is this video is going to include themes of things such as mass genocide, forced labour, people being held prisoner against their will, child soldiers, as well as many other gruesome things. However, this is a great example, much like Unit 731, of how evil people can be within war if their power is left unchecked. With that being said, I hope you enjoy the video and let's get to it. Power is an addictive thing. People can do horrific things with both the conquest for power and then doing whatever is necessary to keep it. Pol Pot embodies this better than anyone as the leader of the Khmer Rouge and eventually Cambodia itself. His regime killed millions of Cambodians, but to understand the madness, we must first try to understand the man. So, let's go for a holiday in Cambodia and learn about another example of a historical evil. Saloth Sar, later known as Pol Pot, was born in 1925 in the small village of Prek Sabov, located about 100 miles north of the Cambodian capital, Phnom Penh. His family were relatively wealthy and owned around 50 acres of rice paddy, which was 10 times the national average. In 1934, Pol Pot moved to Phnom Penh, where he spent a year in a Buddhist monastery before attending a French Catholic primary school. His Cambodian education continued until 1949, where he then travelled to Paris on a scholarship. While there, he studied radio technology and became active in communist circles. When Pol Pot returned to Cambodia in January 1953, the whole region was revolting against the French colonial rule. Cambodia officially gained its independence from France later that year. Pol Pot, meanwhile, joined the Proto-Communist Khmer People's Revolutionary Party, or the KPRP, which had been set up in 1951 under the guidance of the North Vietnamese. From 1956 to 1963, Pol Pot taught history, geography and French literature at a private school, while at the same time plotting a revolution. In 1960, Pot helped to reorganise the KPRP into a party that specifically held Marxism/Leninism beliefs. 3 years later, following a clampdown on communist activity, he and other party members moved deep into the countryside of northern Cambodia, at first encamping with a group of Viet Cong. Pol Pot, who had begun to emerge as Cambodian party chief and the newly formed Khmer Rouge guerrilla army, launched a national uprising in 1968. The revolution started off slowly, though they were able to grab a foothold in the sparsely populated northeast. In March 1970, General Lon Nol initiated a military coup while Cambodia's hereditary leader, Prince Norodom Sihanouk, was out of the country. A civil war then broke out in which Prince Norodom allied himself with the Khmer Rouge and Lon Nol received the backing of the United States. Both the Khmer Rouge and Lon Nol's troops purposely committed mass atrocities. At the same time, around 70,000 US and South Vietnamese troops stormed across the Cambodian border to fight North Vietnamese and Viet Cong troops who had taken sanctuary there. US President Richard Nixon also ordered a secret bombing campaign as part of the Vietnam War. Over the span of 4 years, US planes dropped over 500,000 tons of bombs over Cambodia, more than 3 times the amount that was dropped on Japan during World War II. However, by the time the US's bombing campaign had ended, the number of Khmer Rouge troops had increased dramatically, and they now controlled 3/4 of the territory in Cambodia. Because if you spend 4 years bombing a country to high hell, the residents of that country are not going to like you very much and are probably going to join with your enemy, who are also fighting you. So, well done, America. Soon after, they began to attack the capital Phnom Penh with rockets and artillery. A final assault of the refugee-filled capital started in January 1975, with the Khmer Rouge bombarding the airport and blockading river crossings. A US airlift of supplies failed to prevent thousands of children from starving. So already we can see the kind of attitude that Pol Pot has. He doesn't care if children are dying. He doesn't care how many innocents are hurt in his conquest for power. His goal, his end goal, is all that matters, and anyone who gets hurt in the process of that is just collateral damage. Finally, on April 17, 1975, the Khmer Rouge entered the city, winning the civil war and ending the fighting. About 500,000 Cambodians had died during the civil war, but the true horror was only beginning. Almost immediately after taking power, the Khmer Rouge evacuated Phnom Penh's 2.5 million residents. Professionals such as doctors and teachers were stripped of their professions and forced to work in the rice fields as part of a re-education process. After they seized power, the Khmer Rouge wanted to turn the country into an Algerian socialist republic founded on policies of ultra-Maoism and influenced by the Cultural Revolution. To fulfill their goals, the Khmer Rouge emptied the cities and forced Cambodians to relocate to labour camps in the countryside, where mass executions, forced labour, physical abuse, malnutrition and disease were unfortunately rampant. During the regime of Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge, 1.5 to 2 million people had died due to the party's policies. This included 200 to 300,000 Chinese Cambodians, 90,000 Muslims, and 20,000 Vietnamese Cambodians. 20,000 people alone passed through the infamous Security Prison 21, one of 196 prisons operated by the Khmer Rouge. Only 7 people were reported to have survived Prison 21. Prisoners were also taken to the killing fields, where they were executed by a pickaxe in order to save bullets. Jesus, that's brutal. The fact that they couldn't even be bothered to shoot them and they'd rather... I hate humanity. Anyway, prisoners were then buried in mass graves within the killing fields, hence why they're called the killing fields, because people were killed there. Unfortunately, the abduction and indoctrination of children was widespread, and many were persuaded or forced to commit atrocities by members of the Khmer Rouge. Just a little side note here, currently the Documentation Centre of Cambodia has mapped 23,745 mass graves containing approximately 1.3 million suspected victims of execution. Direct execution is believed to account for up to 60% of the genocide's death toll, with other victims succumbing to starvation, exhaustion or disease. So yeah, even now they're still finding mass graves and millions of bones and people buried beneath the fields in Cambodia, which has got to be just... Jesus, that just speaks for the evil of these people. The genocide itself triggered an outflow of refugees, many of whom escaped to the neighbouring Thailand and to a lesser extent Vietnam. You see, because under Pol Pot, the state controlled all aspects of a person's life: money, private property, jewellery, gambling, most reading material and religion were all outlawed. Agriculture was collectivised, children were then taken from their homes and forced into the military, and strict rules governing sexual relations, vocabulary and clothing were laid down. By this point, the Khmer Rouge and Pol Pot had an iron-fisted grip on every aspect of their citizens' lives, making any and all resistance pretty much futile. The Khmer Rouge, which by this point had renamed the country Democratic Kampuchea, even insisted on realigning rice fields in order to recreate the symmetrical checkerboard pictured on their coat of arms, which is like... that is just one of the biggest examples of someone just letting power go to their head that I've ever seen. Just like, oh yeah, just move all the rice fields. I don't care how long it takes. I want them to look pretty. What, 15 people died from exhaustion? I don't care. I want my rice fields to look nice. Yeah, like, Jesus. At first, Pol Pot largely governed from behind the scenes. He became Prime Minister in 1976 after Prince Norodom was forced to resign. However, by that point, border skirmishes were occurring regularly between Cambodia and Vietnam. The fighting intensified in 1977, and in December 1978, the Vietnamese sent over 600,000 troops, along with air and artillery units, across the border. On January 7, 1979, they captured Phnom Penh and forced Pol Pot to flee back into the jungle, where he resumed guerrilla operations. Throughout the 1980s, the Khmer Rouge received arms and political support from both China and the United States, which were both opposed to the decade-long Vietnamese occupation. But the group's influence began to decrease following a 1991 ceasefire agreement, and the movement completely collapsed by the end of the decade. So what became of the man responsible for all this death and destruction? Well, in 1997, a Khmer Rouge splinter group captured Pol Pot and placed him under house arrest, to which he then died in his sleep on April 15, 1998, at the age of 72, due to heart failure. Only a handful of Khmer Rouge leaders were convicted by a United Nations-backed tribunal for crimes against humanity, meaning that at the end of it, this guy didn't even see justice. He got put under house arrest, which by all accounts is a way more comfortable version of being in prison. You're essentially just like confined to your own house. So he got to live out the rest of his days in seemingly relative comfort, and even then only a handful of people who helped commit these atrocities were ever convicted, which is a massive injustice in itself and kind of makes me mad. It's like the Unit 731 video where they basically all got away with it because they were like, oh yeah, we'll give all of our research to you, to the US government, and then none of the research meant anything. It was all just barbaric. So I think this is another example of evil still finding a way to come out of a situation they've caused relatively unscathed, and things like that make me so mad because it proves there is no justice in this world, and it's just another reason as to why I hate humanity. But anyway, that's the story of Pol Pot. Hello everyone, thank you for watching this video. Excuse my little rants towards the end there. Things like this do make me a bit angry when very evil people get off seemingly scot-free. But I really hope you enjoy this video. I'm slowly getting more to grips with editing and things like that, so hopefully the more videos I make, the better they come out. I really found this one interesting to research because obviously Pol Pot is kind of an infamous figure, but not a lot of people know exactly how he came to power and what the full extent of the Khmer Rouge is, which is why I was so happy to talk about this topic. But that is it for now. This has been Spook. You have been to the Spook Corner, and I'll see you next time.